She learned early that surviving meant staying silent until an exiled alpha king saw the bruises she tried to hide. If you're ready for a powerful story of transformation and healing, like this video, subscribe to Lynda's audiobook Haven, and comment the country you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Chapter 1. The Girl Who Learned to Endure. Laurie learned to count the seconds between her mother's footsteps. Heavy. Deliberate. Each one a warning that rattled through the thin floorboards of their apartment like a countdown she couldn't stop. She pressed herself smaller against the kitchen wall, shoulders curved inward, eyes fixed on the cracked linoleum beneath her bare feet. Invisible, she reminded herself. Be invisible. You worthless little parasite. Her mother's voice came first, low, venomous, the kind of quiet that was worse than shouting. And Mumo didn't need to raise her voice to make Laurie feel like the air was being squeezed from her lungs. Laurie didn't look up. She'd learned years ago that eye contact was permission. Permission to hit harder. Permission to keep going. I asked you a question. I'm sorry, Laurie whispered. Her throat was dry. She didn't know what the question had been. It didn't matter. The answer was always the same. The slap came fast, sharp across her cheek, hard enough that her vision blurred. She stumbled but didn't cry out. Crying made it worse. You're sorry? Anne's laugh was brittle, jagged. You've been sorry your whole miserable life, and it hasn't changed a damn thing. Laurie tasted copper. She kept her hands at her sides, fingers trembling, and waited for it to be over. It was always over eventually. Her mother moved past her, muttering something cruel under her breath, and disappeared into the other room. The door slammed. Laurie exhaled. She waited 5 full minutes before she moved. The diner on 4th Street smelled like burnt coffee and old grease, but it was the only place in town that didn't ask questions when you showed up with bruises. Laurie kept her head down as she wiped tables, her pale hair falling forward to hide the fresh mark on her cheek. The lunch rush had thinned out, leaving only a handful of regulars, Raymond P. and Seth J. Lopez arguing over a baseball game at the counter, Julie K. Kennan nursing her 3rd cup of decaf by the window. Laurie, honey, you all right? Jennifer L. Gould, the day manager, was watching her from behind the register. Her voice was kind, but Laurie had learned not to trust kindness. It never lasted. I'm fine, Laurie said quickly. She forced a small smile, the kind that deflected without inviting more questions. Just tired. Jennifer didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. She never did. That was the unspoken rule in places like this. You didn't ask what you already knew the answer to. Laurie moved to the next table, her hands steady even though her chest felt tight. She'd gotten good at this. At pretending. At enduring. Stanley Plumley came in just before 2, shaking rain from his jacket. He nodded at her as he passed, polite but distant, and took his usual seat near the back. Laurie brought him coffee without being asked. Thank you, sweetheart, he said, but his eyes didn't quite meet hers. No one's ever did. She was a ghost in her own life. Present but unseen. Useful but unimportant. And that was safer. When her shift ended, Laurie walked home through the rain. The cold soaked through her thin jacket, but she didn't hurry. Home wasn't a place you rushed toward. The apartment was dark when she slipped inside. Her mother was asleep or drunk, or both. Laurie moved quietly through the narrow hallway, past the living room where empty bottles crowded the coffee table, and into the cramped space she called her room. It wasn't much. A mattress on the floor. A cracked mirror. A single window that overlooked the alley behind the building. She sat on the edge of the mattress and peeled off her wet jacket. Her hands were shaking again. She hated that. Hated how her body betrayed her even when she thought she was holding it together. There was a bruise blooming on her ribs, dark purple, tender to the touch. She'd gotten it 2 days ago. There would be another one tomorrow, or the day after that. There always was. Laurie pulled her knees to her chest and stared at the wall. She used to cry. When she was younger, when she still believed someone might come. But no one ever did. Wallace Fernandez, the landlord, had heard her mother screaming once and knocked on the door. And had smiled sweetly and sent him away. Jessica, the neighbor across the hall, had asked Laurie once if she needed help. Laurie had said no. Because what was the point? This was her life. This was all it would ever be. She closed her eyes and counted her breaths. In. Out. In. Out. Tomorrow, she would wake up and do it all again. She always did. Chapter 2, The Wolf Who Watched. Joshua had been in town for 3 days, and he'd already learned to hate it. Not the place itself, though the streets were grey and the buildings sagged with neglect. It was the smallness of it. The way people moved through their lives with their heads down, voices hushed, as if the world had taught them that taking up space was dangerous. He recognized that look. He'd worn it once, a long time ago, before he'd learned that silence was just another kind of cage. Now he sat in the corner booth of the diner on 4th Street, nursing cold coffee and watching the rain streak down the window. He wasn't supposed to be here. Wasn't supposed to be anywhere, really. Exile meant disappearing, and he'd gotten good at it. But something had pulled him to this town. His wolf had been restless for weeks, pacing beneath his skin, growling at shadows. Joshua had learned to listen to that instinct. It had kept him alive when everything else had tried to kill him. So he'd come. And now he was watching her. The girl moved like she was apologizing for existing. Joshua noticed her the first day, pale hair, thin frame, eyes that never lifted higher than the floor. She worked the tables with mechanical precision, efficient but joyless, and every time someone spoke to her, she flinched. Not obviously. Most people wouldn't have seen it. But Joshua wasn't most people. He'd spent years learning to read the language of fear, and this girl spoke it fluently. She brought him a refill without being asked, her movements careful, controlled. Anything else? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. No. Thank you. She nodded and turned away before he could say anything more. Joshua watched her retreat to the counter, where Jennifer L. Gould said something that made her smile, small, fleeting, and utterly fake. He could see the exhaustion beneath it. The weight. His wolf stirred. Not our business, he told it firmly. But the wolf didn't agree. He saw the bruise on her 3rd shift. She turned too quickly, reaching for a coffee pot, and her sleeve rode up just enough to expose the mottled purple and yellow along her forearm. She noticed him looking and yanked the fabric down, her face flushing with something that looked like shame. Joshua's jaw tightened. He knew what those bruises meant. Knew the careful way she moved, the way she made herself smaller, the way she avoided eye contact. He'd seen it before, in the faces of wolves who'd been broken by cruel alphas, in the eyes of people who'd learned that survival meant submission. His hands curled into fists beneath the table. Walk away, he told himself. This isn't your fight. But when she passed his booth again, he caught the faint scent of fear clinging to her skin, sharp, acidic, familiar, and something in his chest twisted. She wasn't Pack. Wasn't even Shifter. But she was suffering. And he couldn't look away. He followed her home that night. Not closely. He kept his distance, moving through the rain-soaked streets like a shadow, his wolf senses guiding him. She walked with her shoulders hunched, her pace slow, as if she were walking toward something she dreaded. The apartment building was exactly what he expected, crumbling brick, broken windows, the kind of place where people learned not to ask questions. She disappeared inside. Joshua stood across the street, rain dripping from his hair, and debated. He should leave. He'd spent the last 5 years avoiding exactly this kind of entanglement. Caring meant risk. Risk meant exposure. Exposure meant death. But then he heard it. A woman's voice, shrill and vicious, cutting through the thin walls of the building. Then a crash. A muffled cry. Silence. His wolf snarled. Joshua closed his eyes and forced himself to breathe. In. Out. In. Out. Not your fight. But his feet were already moving. He didn't go inside. Not yet. Instead, he stayed in the alley behind the building, his eyes fixed on the single window glowing faintly on the 2nd floor. He could hear movement, heavy footsteps, the slam of a door, the low murmur of a television. Then, finally, the light went out. Joshua waited. An hour passed. Then 2. When the girl's silhouette appeared in the window, small, hunched, alone, his wolf went still. She sat there for a long time, unmoving, her head bowed. And Joshua made a decision. He didn't know her name, didn't know her story, but he knew what it looked like when someone was drowning. And he'd spent too many years ignoring that look in the mirror to ignore it now. Tomorrow, he would act. Tonight, he would watch. Because someone needed to bear witness. Someone needed to see. Chapter 3, A Choice That Changes Everything. It happened on a Thursday. Laurie had learned that the worst days never announced themselves. They arrived quietly, disguised as ordinary mornings, and by the time you realized what was coming, it was already too late. Her mother had been drinking since noon. Laurie could smell it the moment she walked through the door after her shift, the sour-sweet stench of cheap vodka, the cigarette smoke that clung to everything. And was in the kitchen, swaying slightly as she stared at nothing. Laurie moved carefully toward her room, each step measured, silent. She almost made it. "Where the hell do you think you're going?" Laurie froze. Her hand was inches from the doorknob. I'm tired. I thought I'd." "You thought?" And laughed, harsh and cutting. "You don't get to think. You don't get to do anything except what I tell you." Laurie turned slowly, keeping her eyes down. "I'm sorry. What do you need?" "What do I need?" Her mother's voice rose, shrill and venomous. "I need you to not be a constant goddamn disappointment. I need you to justify the fact that I didn't leave you in a dumpster the day you were born." The words landed like blows. Laurie's chest tightened, but she kept her face blank. She'd heard worse. She could endure this. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. And moved closer. Her breath was hot and acrid. "Sorry doesn't pay the rent. Sorry doesn't make up for the fact that you ruined my life." Laurie said nothing. There was nothing to say. The first hit came without warning, a backhand across her face that sent her stumbling into the wall. The second was a shove, hard enough that she fell. The third. She didn't see it coming. Her mother's fist connected with her ribs, and the air left her lungs in a painful rush. Laurie curled instinctively, trying to protect herself, but Anne was already reaching for her hair, yanking her head back. "You're nothing," and hissed. "You hear me? Nothing." And then the door exploded inward. Laurie didn't understand what was happening at first. One moment, her mother's hand was twisted in her hair. The next, Anne was across the room, slammed against the far wall with enough force to crack the plaster. A man stood in the doorway. No, not a man. Something asterisk more star. His eyes were dark and burning, his presence filling the small apartment like a storm. Laurie's breath caught. She knew him. The man from the diner. The one who watched. "Touch her again," he said quietly, "and I'll break every bone in your body." And stared at him, her face pale, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Joshua didn't look at her. His eyes were on Laurie, and the rage in them should have terrified her. It didn't. "Get up," he said, his voice softer now but no less commanding. Laurie tried to move, but her body wouldn't cooperate. Her ribs screamed in protest. Her hands shook. Joshua crossed the room in 2 strides and crouched beside her. Up close, she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands curled into fists as he took in the bruises, the blood at the corner of her mouth. "Can you stand?" he asked. She nodded, even though she wasn't sure. He helped her up, his grip steady but careful, as if she might shatter. When she swayed, he caught her, one arm sliding around her shoulders. "You can't just," and found her voice, shrill and indignant. "She's my daughter. You have no right." Joshua turned his head, and whatever Anne saw in his expression made her fall silent. "She's not your daughter," he said, his voice cold and final. "She's not your punching bag. She's not your anything anymore. You can't take her. I'll call the police. I'll do it." Joshua's smile was sharp and humorless. "Tell them how I found you beating a girl half your size. Tell them about the bruises. The broken ribs. I'm sure they'll be very interested." Anne's face twisted with fury, but she said nothing. Joshua looked down at Laurie. "Do you want to stay here?" The question was simple. The answer should have been too. But Laurie had spent her entire life being told she had no choices. That wanting anything was selfish. That leaving meant betrayal. Her voice broke. "I don't know where I'd go. With me, Joshua said. If you'll trust me. Trust. The word felt foreign. Dangerous. But when she looked into his eyes, she didn't see pity. She didn't see judgment. She saw someone who'd chosen to see her when the rest of the world had looked away. Okay, she whispered. Joshua nodded once, then turned and guided her toward the door. And screamed something behind them, threats, curses, promises of consequences. Laurie didn't look back. For the first time in her life, she walked away. And the world didn't end. Chapter 4, Safety Feels Like Silence. The cabin sat at the edge of the forest, hidden by trees and shadows, as if the world had forgotten it existed. Laurie stood in the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself, and tried to remember how to breathe. Everything hurt. Her ribs throbbed with each inhale. Her cheek was swollen where her mother had hit her. But worse than the physical pain was the strange, weightless feeling in her chest, like she'd stepped off a cliff and was still waiting to hit the ground. You can come in, Joshua said from behind her. His voice was gentle, careful. Or you can stay out here. Whatever you need. She forced herself to move forward. The cabin was small but clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. A worn couch sat near the window. The kitchen was barely more than a counter and a stove, but it smelled like pine and wood smoke instead of stale alcohol and cigarette ash. It felt like another world. Joshua moved past her, keeping his distance, and set a glass of water on the small table. You should sit, he said. I'll get something for those ribs. Laurie lowered herself onto the couch, moving slowly, and stared at her hands. They were still shaking. She waited for him to ask questions. To demand explanations. To tell her what she owed him for this. He didn't. Instead, he returned with a first aid kit and crouched in front of her, his movements deliberate and unthreatening. I'm going to check your ribs, he said. Is that okay? No one had ever asked her permission before. Okay, she whispered. His hands were warm and steady as he examined her, his touch clinical but impossibly careful. When she flinched, he stopped immediately, waiting until she nodded before continuing. Bruised, he said finally. Not broken. But you need rest. Rest. The word felt absurd. She'd never had rest. She'd had survival. Why did you help me? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Joshua sat back on his heels, his dark eyes steady on hers. Because no one deserves what she did to you. You don't know me. I know enough. Laurie looked away. Her throat felt tight. I don't have anywhere else to go. I don't have money. I can't. You don't owe me anything, Joshua said quietly. You can stay here as long as you need. No conditions. No expectations. She wanted to believe him. But belief was dangerous. The first 3 days passed in silence. Joshua gave her the bedroom, small, sparse, but warm, and took the couch for himself. He cooked simple meals and left them on the table without comment. He didn't hover. Didn't ask questions. Didn't demand anything. Laurie spent most of her time by the window, watching the forest. Waiting for her mother to appear. Waiting for the police. Waiting for something terrible to happen. Nothing did. On the 4th day, she found Joshua outside, chopping wood with practiced efficiency. His shirt clung to his back, damp with sweat, and for the first time, she noticed the scars, thin, jagged lines that crossed his shoulders and disappeared beneath the fabric. He looked up when she approached, his expression unreadable. You were hurt, she said before she could think better of it. Joshua paused, the axe balanced in his hands. A long time ago. Does it still hurt? Sometimes. He set the axe down and studied her. Does yours? She knew he wasn't talking about her ribs. Yes, she admitted. He nodded, as if that answer made sense. It gets easier. Not all at once. But it does. Laurie didn't know if she believed that. But she wanted to. By the end of the first week, something shifted. Laurie started eating at the table instead of in her room. She washed dishes without being asked. She even spoke small things at first, tentative observations about the weather or the trees. Joshua listened like every word mattered. One evening, as they sat by the fire, he asked, "What do you want, Laurie?" The question caught her off guard. What do you mean? For yourself, he clarified. Not what someone told you to want. Not what you think you're allowed to have. What do you want? No one had ever asked her that. She stared into the flames, her chest tight. I don't know. That's okay, Joshua said. You have time to figure it out. Time. Safety. Choice. Laurie had never had any of those things. But here, in this cabin at the edge of the world, with a man who'd chosen to see her when no one else had, she began to believe they might be possible. She fell asleep that night without counting her breaths. Without waiting for footsteps. Without fear. And for the first time in her life, safety didn't feel like a lie. It felt like silence. Chapter 5. The King Without a Throne. Laurie woke to the sound of breaking glass. She bolted upright, her heart hammering, instinct screaming at her to hide. But then she remembered she wasn't in the apartment. Her mother wasn't here. She was safe. Another crash echoed from outside, followed by a low, guttural snarl that made the hair on her arms stand on end. That wasn't human. Laurie moved to the window, her hands trembling, and peered into the darkness. The moonlight illuminated the clearing behind the cabin, and what she saw made her breath catch. Joshua stood in the center of the open space, his chest heaving, his hands curled into fists. But it wasn't Joshua that terrified her. It was the wolf. Massive. Black as midnight. Eyes burning gold. It circled him, snarling, and for a moment Laurie thought it was attacking. But then she realized they were the same. The wolf moved when Joshua moved. Stopped when he stopped. They were one. Joshua threw his head back and roared, and the sound that tore from his throat was pure animal rage. The wolf surged forward, then dissolved into shadow, then reformed again, flickering between man and beast like a flame struggling to stay lit. Laurie pressed her hand to the glass, her pulse racing. What was he? She was still awake when Joshua came back inside hours later. He stopped in the doorway when he saw her sitting at the table, his expression carefully blank. His shirt was torn. Scratches marked his arms. His eyes, still faintly golden in the dim light, held something wild and exhausted. You saw, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Laurie nodded. What are you? Joshua moved to the sink and gripped the edge, his knuckles white. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, I'm a wolf shifter. An alpha. He paused. Or I was. He turned to face her, and the weight in his expression made her chest tighten. I was a king once. I ruled a territory, hundreds of wolves, families, children. I was supposed to protect them. What happened? Joshua's jaw clenched. I refused to become the kind of ruler my father was. He believed strength meant cruelty. That fear kept people loyal. When he died, the council expected me to continue his legacy. He exhaled slowly. I wouldn't. So they gave me a choice: rule their way, or leave. You left, Laurie said softly. I left. His voice was bitter. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought someone better would take my place. And did they? Joshua's laugh was hollow. No. The council took control. They're worse than my father ever was. They sacrifice the weak to maintain power. They silence dissent. Children disappear, and no one asks questions because asking means dying. Laurie's stomach twisted. She knew what it was like to live in a world where suffering was normal. Where cruelty went unchallenged because everyone was too afraid to act. Why did you stay away? She asked. Because I'm a coward. The words came out sharp, self-lacerating. Because I told myself that walking away was noble. That I was refusing to be corrupted. He shook his head. But the truth is, I was just running. And people suffered because of it. Laurie stood slowly and crossed the small space between them. Joshua watched her approach, something uncertain flickering in his eyes. You saved me, she said quietly. You didn't have to. You could have walked away like everyone else did. But you didn't. That's different. Is it? She met his gaze, her voice stronger now. You saw someone suffering, and you acted. That's not cowardice. Joshua stared at her, and for a moment, She saw past the guilt and the rage to the man beneath, someone who'd carried the weight of impossible choices and believed he'd failed. "They came to find me," he said finally. 3 days ago. "Wolves from the territory. They're begging me to come back. The council is planning something, a culling. They're going to kill anyone they deem too weak to contribute." Horror washed over Laurie. "Children? Among others. Then you have to go back." Joshua's expression hardened. "If I go back, I'll have to fight. I'll have to kill. I'll become exactly what I swore I wouldn't be. Or," Laurie said carefully, "you'll become what they need. Someone who fights for them, not against them." He studied her for a long moment, something shifting in his eyes. "You've been here 2 weeks, and you're already braver than I've been in 5 years." "I'm not brave." Laurie's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm terrified. But I know what it's like to live in a place where no one helps. Where suffering is just normal." She swallowed hard. "If you can stop that, you have to try." Joshua reached out slowly and cupped her face with one scarred hand. His touch was warm, gentle, reverent. "Come with me," he said. "What?" "When I go back. Come with me." Laurie's heart stuttered. I can't." "You're stronger than you know," Joshua said. "And I don't want to do this without you." She should say no. Should stay hidden. Should stay safe. But safety without purpose was just another kind of cage. "Okay," she whispered. And the king without a throne finally chose to reclaim what he'd lost. Chapter 6, A Bond That Burns and Builds. The journey to the territory took 3 days. Joshua said little as they traveled through dense forest, his movements confident and purposeful. Laurie followed, her body aching from the unfamiliar exertion, but she didn't complain. She'd asked to come. She'd made a choice. Now she had to live with it. On the second night, as they camped beneath a canopy of stars, Joshua finally spoke. "There's something you need to understand," he said, his voice low. "About what you are to me." Laurie looked up from the small fire between them. "What do you mean?" Joshua's jaw worked, as if the words were difficult to find. "Wolves mate for life. When we find the person who completes us, our other half, we know. We feel it." He paused. "I felt it the first time I saw you." Laurie's breath caught. "I don't understand." "You're my mate, Laurie." His eyes met hers, burning with intensity. "My wolf recognized you before I did. That's why I couldn't walk away. Why I couldn't leave you there." The word hung between them, mate, heavy with implications she couldn't begin to process. "But I'm not," she gestured helplessly at herself. "I'm not like you. I'm human. I'm nothing special." "You're everything," Joshua said fiercely. "And you don't have to be a wolf to be my mate. The bond doesn't care about species. It cares about souls." Laurie's hands trembled. "I don't know what that means." "It means," Joshua said carefully, "that if you accept it, accept *me*, the bond will change you. Not immediately. But over time. You'll become stronger. Faster. You might even shift, though it's rare for human mates. And if I don't accept it." Pain flashed across his face. "Then I'll still protect you. Still care for you. But the bond will remain incomplete. For both of us." Laurie stared into the fire, her mind racing. A bond. A mate. A future she'd never imagined. "What do you feel?" she asked quietly. "When you look at me." Joshua was silent for a long moment. Then, "Like I'm home. Like every broken piece of me finally fits." His voice dropped. "Like I'd burn the world down to keep you safe." Her chest tightened. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Like she mattered. Like she was worth something. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Of me. Of this. Of wanting something and having it taken away." Joshua moved around the fire and knelt beside her, his presence warm and solid. "I can't promise you'll never hurt again," he said. "But I can promise I'll never be the one who hurts you. And I'll fight anyone who tries." Laurie looked into his eyes and saw the truth there, raw, unshakable, terrifying in its intensity. "I want to accept it," she whispered. "I want to be brave enough." "You already are." And when he leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers, Something shifted inside her chest, a warmth that spread through her veins like liquid gold, burning and building until she gasped. "What's happening?" she breathed. "The bond," Joshua said, his voice rough. "It's beginning." By the third day, Lori could feel the changes. Her senses sharpened. She could hear things she shouldn't, the rustle of animals in the underbrush, the distant call of birds, Joshua's heartbeat when he stood close. Her exhaustion faded, replaced by an energy that thrummed beneath her skin. And she could feel him star. Not just physically, but emotionally. His determination. His fear. His fierce, protective love. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like waking up. They reached the border of the territory as the sun began to set. Joshua stopped at the edge of a ridge overlooking a valley where lights flickered in the distance. Homes, Lori realized. A community. "That's it," Joshua said. "The heart of the territory." Lori could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands curled into fists. "Are you ready?" "No," he admitted. "But I'm done running." 3 figures emerged from the trees below. Wolves, Lori realized, though they walked on 2 legs. They moved with predatory grace, their eyes fixed on Joshua. The one in front, a woman with silver hair and sharp features, stopped a few feet away. "You came back." "I came back," Joshua confirmed. The woman's gaze shifted to Lori, and something calculating flickered in her expression. "And you brought a human." "She's my mate," Joshua said, his voice hard. "And she's under my protection." The woman's eyebrows rose. "A human mate? How unexpected." She studied Lori for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "The council won't like this." "The council," Joshua said coldly, "can go to hell." A smile ghosted across the woman's lips. "Good. Because we need a king who's willing to fight." She extended her hand. "Welcome home, Alpha." Joshua clasped her hand, and Lori felt the bond surge between them, his resolve, his fear, his hope. She stepped forward and took his other hand. Together, they descended into the valley. Into the unknown. Into a future that would demand everything they had. But for the first time in her life, Lori wasn't facing it alone. And that made all the difference. Chapter 7, Return of the Alpha King. The council chambers sat at the heart of the territory, a stone building that had stood for generations, built to endure. Lori stood at Joshua's side as they entered, her heart hammering against her ribs. The bond thrummed between them, steady and grounding, but it couldn't erase the fear coiling in her stomach. The room was filled with wolves. Dozens of them, watching with eyes that gleamed in the torchlight. At the far end, seated on a raised platform, were 5 figures, the council members who'd ruled in Joshua's absence. The man in the center rose slowly. He was older, gray-haired, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Joshua," he said, his voice smooth. "How unexpected. We thought you'd forgotten about us." "I haven't forgotten anything, Marcus," Joshua replied, his tone cold. "Including what you've done in my absence." Marcus spread his hands in a gesture of false innocence. "We've done what was necessary. Maintained order. Kept the territory strong. By culling the weak." Joshua's voice cut through the room like a blade. "By murdering children?" A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. Several wolves exchanged glances. "Culling?" Marcus's expression hardened. "We prefer to call it selection. Every species thrives by eliminating those who cannot contribute. It's natural. Evolutionary. It's genocide," Joshua said flatly. Marcus's eyes narrowed. "You abdicated your throne, boy. You don't get to walk back in here and question our methods." "I didn't abdicate." Joshua's voice dropped to a growl that raised the hair on Lori's arms. "I was driven out for refusing to become a tyrant." "But that ends now. Does it?" Marcus smiled. "You and what army?" Joshua didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to face the assembled wolves. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of command, the unmistakable authority of an alpha. "I know what you've suffered," he said. "I know you've watched your children disappear. Your families torn apart. I know you've lived in fear, wondering if you'll be next." He paused. "I know because I failed you. I walked away when I should have stayed. I chose my conscience over your safety, and I was wrong. Silence fell over the chamber. But I'm here now, Joshua continued. And I'm offering you a choice. Stand with me, and we end this. We take back our territory. We build something better than what my father created or what this council has corrupted. His eyes blazed. Or stay silent, and watch as they continue to destroy everything we should be protecting. Marcus laughed, harsh and mocking. Bold words from a king who ran away. Why should they trust you now? Because, a voice called from the crowd, he came back. Laurie turned to see the silver-haired woman from the border, Jessica, she'd learned, step forward. Others followed. Men and women, young and old, forming a line behind Joshua. Because he brought his mate, Jessica continued, her gaze steady on the council. A human mate. He's built a bond that makes him stronger, not weaker. That's not the action of a coward. More wolves moved forward. Dozens. Then dozens more. Marcus's expression darkened. This is treason. No, Joshua said quietly. This is justice. The council member to Marcus's right, a massive man with scarred hands, stood abruptly. You want your throne back? Come and take it. He shifted mid-sentence, his body exploding into fur and muscle, and lunged. Joshua met him halfway. The impact shook the chamber. Claws met claws, fangs flashed in the firelight. Laurie stumbled back as other council members shifted and joined the fight. Chaos erupted, wolves snarling, bodies colliding, blood spattering the ancient stones. Laurie's instincts screamed at her to run, to hide. But the bond pulsed with Joshua's determination, his fury, his absolute refusal to back down. And something in her answered. Power surged through her veins, hot and wild and completely foreign. Her vision sharpened. Her muscles coiled. When a wolf broke from the melee and charged toward her, teeth bared, she didn't freeze. She moved. Her hand shot out, and impossibly, she caught the wolf by the throat. Strength she'd never possessed flooded her arms. The wolf yelped and scrambled backward, eyes wide with shock. Laurie stared at her hands, trembling. That's it. Joshua's voice cut through the chaos. He stood over Marcus's prone form, blood streaking his face, his eyes blazing gold. Enough. The fighting stopped. Joshua looked around the chamber, his chest heaving. The council is dissolved. Anyone who wants to challenge my claim can face me now. One at a time or all at once. I don't care. No one moved. Good. Joshua straightened, and despite the blood and exhaustion, he looked every inch a king. From this moment forward, this territory will be built on protection, not persecution. On strength that defends the vulnerable, not exploits them. His gaze swept the crowd. Anyone who can't accept that is free to leave. Silence. Then, slowly, wolves began to kneel. One by one, they bowed their heads in submission, in acceptance, in hope. Joshua's hand found Laurie's, his grip steady and warm. And the exiled Alpha King reclaimed his throne. Not through cruelty. Through choice. Chapter 8, The Woman at the Gates. 3 weeks after Joshua reclaimed his throne, the woman appeared at the gates. Laurie was in the main hall when Jessica found her, the silver-haired wolf's expression tight with something between concern and anger. There's someone here to see you, Jessica said carefully. At the border. She says she's your mother. The world tilted. Laurie gripped the edge of the table, her breath catching. What? And Mumo. That's the name she gave. Jessica's eyes were sharp, assessing. Do you want us to send her away? Laurie's mind raced. Her mother. Asterisk here star. After everything. No, she heard herself say. I'll see her. Jessica frowned. Laurie, you don't owe her anything. You know that, right? I know. But even as she said it, old instincts stirred the need to explain, to justify, to somehow make things right. I still need to see her. Joshua appeared in the doorway, his expression hardening when he saw her face. The bond flared between them, carrying her fear, her confusion. What happened? He demanded. My mother's here. His eyes flashed gold. I'll kill her. No. Laurie's voice was firmer than she felt. I need to do this. I need to face her. Joshua crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands gentle on her shoulders despite the fury radiating from him. You don't have to do this alone. I know. She reached up and touched his face. But I need to. And stood at the territory's edge, flanked by 2 wolves who watched her with undisguised suspicion. She looked smaller than Laurie remembered. Older. The lines around her mouth had deepened, and her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her purse. But her eyes, those were the same. Sharp. Calculating. Cold. Laurie, and said, her voice saccharine. Baby, I've been so worried about you. The word baby landed like a slap. Laurie's jaw tightened. What do you want? Anne's expression crumpled into something that might have been remorse if Laurie didn't know better. I want to apologize. I wasn't myself. The drinking, the stress, I never meant to hurt you. Lies. Every word was a carefully constructed lie. You beat me, Laurie said quietly. Every day. 4 years. I was sick. And took a step forward. The wolves tensed. But I'm better now. I've been going to meetings. Talking to people. I want to make things right. Make things right? Laurie's voice rose despite herself. You told me I ruined your life. You said you should have left me in a dumpster. I was angry. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. The certainty settled over Laurie like armor. You meant every word. You wanted me to believe I was worthless so I'd never leave. So I'd stay there and let you hurt me because I thought I deserved it. Anne's mask slipped. Just for a second, Laurie saw the flash of rage beneath the performance. After everything I did for you, and hissed. I kept a roof over your head. Fed you. Clothed you. And this is how you repay me? Running off with some animal and living in the woods like trash? I repay you, Laurie said, her voice shaking but strong, by surviving. By getting out. By refusing to become you. Anne's face twisted. You ungrateful little. That's enough. Joshua appeared beside Laurie, his presence a wall of controlled fury. And took an involuntary step back. You came here hoping she'd feel guilty, Joshua said, his voice deadly quiet. Hoping she'd believe your apologies and come back. That you could manipulate her the way you always have. I'm her mother. You're nothing. Joshua's eyes burned gold. You're a coward who hurt someone weaker because it made you feel powerful. And now you're here because you lost your victim and you can't stand it. Anne's hands curled into fists. She's mine. You can't just take her. She was never yours, Joshua growled. She's mine. My mate. My queen, and if you ever come near her again, there won't be enough left of you to identify. Anne stared at him, and for the first time, Laurie saw something she'd never seen before. Fear. Not the fear Anne had instilled in her daughter, but real, primal terror. Laurie, Anne tried one last time, her voice desperate. Please. I'm your mother. We're family. Laurie looked at the woman who'd given birth to her. Who'd raised her with fists and cruelty. Who'd taught her that love was earned through suffering. And she felt nothing. No guilt. No obligation. No love. Just emptiness where the pain used to be. No, Laurie said simply. You're not my family. You never were. She turned her back and walked toward the territory, toward Joshua, toward home. Behind her, and screamed something, threats, curses, promises that this wasn't over. Laurie didn't look back. She'd spent her entire life looking back, waiting for permission to exist, believing she deserved the hurt. Not anymore. The gates closed behind her with a heavy, final sound. And the woman who'd haunted her became nothing more than a ghost. Powerless. Forgotten. Gone. Chapter 9, I Choose Myself. The ceremony was held under the full moon. Laurie stood at the center of the gathering, surrounded by hundreds of wolves, families, warriors, children who no longer lived in fear. The air hummed with energy, with anticipation, with the weight of something sacred about to unfold. Joshua stood before her, his hand extended, his eyes bright with pride and love. Are you ready? He asked softly. Laurie looked around at the faces watching her. Jessica, who'd become her fiercest advocate. The mothers who'd thanked her for giving them hope. The children who smiled at her without fear. She thought about the girl she'd been, silent, broken, convinced she deserved nothing. That girl was gone. Yes, she said. I'm ready. Joshua raised his voice so all could hear. Lori was not born a wolf. She was not born into power or privilege. She was born into pain, into a world that tried to break her. He paused. But she survived. She chose to leave. She chose to fight. She chose to stand beside me when she could have stayed hidden. He turned to the assembled pack. She carries the bond of an alpha. The strength of a mate. And tonight, if she accepts it, she will become what she was always meant to be. Lori's heart thundered. The bond between them blazed like wildfire, and she could feel the pack's energy pressing against her skin, waiting, hoping. The choice is yours, Joshua said quietly, for her alone. You can remain human. You can rule beside me as you are. No one will think less of you. What do you want? She asked. I want you to choose yourself, he said. Whatever that means. Lori closed her eyes and reached inward, to the place where the bond lived, that burning, beautiful connection that had saved her, changed her, made her whole. She could feel something else there too. Something wild and powerful, waiting to be unleashed. Her wolf. It had been growing inside her since the moment she accepted the bond. Since the moment she'd caught that attacking wolf with impossible strength. Since the moment she'd walked away from her mother and refused to look back. She'd been becoming this all along. I choose myself, Lori said, opening her eyes. And I choose this. Joshua's smile was radiant. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it. Then claim it. The power surged. Lori gasped as heat flooded her veins, as her bones shifted and reformed, as something primal and ancient tore free from the cage she'd kept it in. Pain flashed through her, sharp and overwhelming, but underneath it was * freedom star. She fell to her knees, and Joshua knelt with her, his hand steadying her, his voice a constant anchor. I've got you. You're safe. Let it happen. And she did. The world exploded into sensation. Colors brightened. Sounds sharpened. She could smell everything, the earth, the trees, the living pulse of the pack around her. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer human. She was wolf. White as moonlight, with eyes that burned silver gold. The pack erupted in howls, joyous, triumphant, welcoming. Joshua shifted beside her, his massive black wolf dwarfing hers, and pressed his muzzle to hers. Through the bond, she felt his overwhelming love, his fierce pride. My mate. My queen. My everything. Lori threw her head back and howled. It was the sound of every silent scream she'd swallowed. Every moment she'd endured. Every tear she'd hidden. It was the sound of survival. Of transformation. Of choosing herself. Epilogue. 6 months later, Lori stood on the balcony of the main hall, watching children play in the courtyard below. They laughed freely, without fear, their parents watching with smiles instead of suspicion. The territory had changed. Where there had been oppression, there was now protection. Where there had been silence, there was now voice. Joshua wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. What are you thinking about? How far we've come, Lori said softly. How different everything is. Do you miss it? Your old life. Lori turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd seen her when she was invisible. Who'd given her safety when she had nothing. Who'd loved her when she couldn't love herself. I don't miss it, she said. I'm grateful for it. Joshua raised an eyebrow. Grateful? It made me strong enough to choose this. She touched his face. To choose you. To choose myself. He kissed her then, soft and reverent, and through the bond she felt what she'd always feel now. Worth. Love. Home. Lori had been beaten. Broken. Told she was nothing. But she'd survived. She'd transformed. And she'd become the queen she was always meant to be. Not because someone saved her. But because she saved herself. Thank you for joining us on Lori's journey from survival to sovereignty. If you loved this story of transformation, resilience, and finding strength in the darkest places, please like and subscribe to Lynda's audiobook Haven for more emotional, powerful stories that celebrate the triumph of the human spirit. Let us know which country you're watching from, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us bring you more stories you'll love. Until next time, remember, you are stronger than you know, and you deserve to choose yourself.